The spark. The Zerithian overseer's whip cracked through the stale air of the mining pit. Kalen Ward's shoulders tensed at the sound, though the lash had not struck him. It landed on another human, a boy no older than 16, who stumbled under the weight of his cart. Pathetic creatures, the overseer hissed in the guttural tones of his kind. His jeweled crest shimmered with disdain as he strode past the line of miners. Kalen gritted his teeth, his calloused hands gripping the handles of his own cart. 10 years in the pits had carved the strength of stone into his frame, but strength meant nothing here. In the Zerithian Empire, humans were not soldiers, nor citizens. They were tools. And tools did not speak. Beside him, his younger brother, Darren, struggled to keep pace. Darren's cough had worsened in recent months, the dust of the mines lodging deep in his lungs. Still, he smiled faintly at Kalen, as though to reassure him. Kalen felt a pang of guilt. He had promised to protect Darren when Earth fell. But here they were, slaves at the edge of the galaxy, owned by monsters who saw them as less than vermin. The overseer returned, his predatory gaze sweeping the line. He stopped at Darren. "You. Too slow." Darren froze, eyes wide. I can work faster," he stammered, voice hoarse. The Zerithian's crest fled, signaling contempt. "Faster? You can barely stand." Without hesitation, he drew his sidearm. Kalen's heart lurched. "Wait, he's just a boy." The overseer sneered, turning the weapon casually. "Then he is a useless boy." The shot rang out, a brilliant lance of energy that struck Darren in the chest. His body collapsed into the dust, lifeless before it hit the ground. For a heartbeat, the world froze. The other humans kept their eyes down, too afraid to move, too broken to hope. But Kalen felt something crack inside him. Years of humiliation, fear, and silence shattered in an instant. The overseer turned away, bored already, and that was when Kalen moved. His hand closed around the haft of his mining tool, a plasma cutter worn smooth by years of labor. He rose, every muscle burning with fury, and in a single motion drove the cutter into the overseer's chest. The alien's eyes widened in disbelief as molten sparks fled. His jewel crest flickered once, then went dark. With a strangled hiss, the overseer crumpled to the ground beside Darren's body. The pit fell silent. Humans stared, slack-jawed, as Kalen stood over the corpse of a Zerithian noble. No one had ever dared. No one had even dreamed. Kalen's breath came ragged. His hands trembled as he looked down at his brother, then at the overseer. He knew what this meant. The Empire would not forgive. They would hunt him, break him, make an example of him. But as whispers began to stir among the miners, whispers of defiance, of possibility, Kalen realized it no longer mattered. One act of rage had lit a fire, and in the heart of that fire, a spark had been born. The fire spreads. Kalen ran. The tunnels of Draxo's prime twisted in endless patterns of rock and shadow, but fear lent his feet wings. Behind him, alarms blared, echoing through the pit shafts as overseers discovered the body. He knew the response, swift, merciless. Humans caught in the sweep would be executed without question. He had no plan. Only the image of Darren's lifeless body burned in his mind, urging him onward. Hours later, Kalen crouched in the ruins of an abandoned shaft, his chest heaving. His plasma cutter was slick with blood, his hands raw. He should have felt terror. Instead, he felt hollow. He expected the end to come quickly. But days passed, and whispers spread faster than patrols could silence them. A human killed a master. One of us struck them down. The chains can break. At first, Kalen thought the stories would die in the dust. But then came word of skirmishes, slave workers on other worlds refusing orders, alien species stirring from long-forgotten rebellions. The overseer's death had traveled light years, carried in hushed voices that no empire could silence. Kalen had not meant to become a symbol. Yet the Zerithians gave him no choice. They hunted him relentlessly. Every checkpoint bore his likeness. Every transmission labeled him terrorist. But with each failed attempt to capture him, his legend only grew. Kalen the Defiant. Kalen the Spark. When bounty hunters cornered him on the freight docks of Vera Station, salvation came from an unexpected source. A tall reptilian alien cut through the hunters with brutal efficiency, his scaled armor gleaming in the station's dull light. Beside him moved a slender woman with pale, luminescent skin, her eyes glowing as though she peered into Kalen's very soul. "You are Kalen Ward," the reptilian said, lowering his blade. His voice carried the rumble of thunder. "The Empire fears you." Kalen tightened his grip on his cutter. "Then you should too." The woman smiled faintly. "We are not your hunters. We are like you, oppressed, waiting for someone to remind us the Zerithians can bleed." Their names were T-Rourke and Vera, a tactician and a healer, fugitives who had resisted long before Kalen struck his blow. Where he had fire, they carried purpose. They spoke of a growing network of rebels, scattered across the stars but desperate for a unifying cause. Kalen shook his head. "I didn't mean to start this. I couldn't let him kill my brother." "That," Vera whispered, her voice echoing in his mind, "is why you must lead. Symbols are not chosen. They are born." Their first strike together was small, an outpost raid on the fringe of Zerithian space. Kalen expected disaster. Instead, the plan unfolded with shocking success. Slaves armed themselves, guards fell, and for the first time in memory, humans and aliens fought side by side. But the Empire's response was swift. Entire colonies suspected of harboring rebels were burned from orbit. Millions perished, not because of Kalen's hand, but because of his spark. And yet, instead of fear, the galaxy answered with fury. Oppressed worlds rose in defiance. Whispers became war cries. The fire was spreading. The war of liberation. The galaxy burned. What began as scattered revolts now surged into full-scale rebellion. Slave minds went dark, supply lines collapsed, and planets once thought loyal declared independence. At the heart of it all, whether he wished it or not, stood Kalen Ward, the human who had proved the Empire was not untouchable. Kalen sat in the command chamber of a captured frigate, its alien controls crudely modified for human hands. Holo-displays flickered with battle reports, uprisings on 3 colonies, skirmishes on half a dozen trade routes. Every victory carried his name. "You inspire them," said T-Rourke, looming over the console. His reptilian features bore scars from endless combat. "They fight harder when they believe you lead." Kalen shook his head. "I'm no general. I'm just a miner who picked up a tool." T-Rourke's golden eyes narrowed. "Perhaps, but the Empire doesn't fear miners. It fears symbols." Vera stood nearby, her gaze distant as she brushed Kalen's thoughts with her telepathic gift. "You doubt yourself," her voice whispered inside his mind. "But doubt is not weakness. It keeps you human." Kalen exhaled slowly. Leadership was a weight he had never sought, yet every day it pressed harder on his shoulders. The coalition grew. Humans, once scattered and broken, became the backbone of resistance cells. Their resilience shocked their allies. Humans could adapt to any environment, fight with any weapon, endure where others faltered. On the battlefield, Kalen saw it firsthand. Humans who had been slaves yesterday fought like soldiers today. They moved with desperation, with fury, with something the Empire had never accounted for, hope. The Zerithians, bound by arrogance and rigid doctrine, could not adapt. Their fleets lumbered in predictable formations. Their commanders clung to tradition, and their soldiers relied on fear to keep order. Against Kalen's coalition, they faltered. One campaign stood out above the rest, the Battle of Raxos. The Empire had fortified the planet into a bastion, confident it could never fall. But Kalen's forces struck from the shadows, hijacked transports, sabotage of supply depots, coordinated strikes by human-led units who fought with guerrilla precision. When the dust cleared, Raxos belonged not to the Empire but to the Coalition. For the first time, an entire world had been freed. The victory echoed across the stars. More species joined the cause, no longer content with whispers but with war cries. Yet triumph carried a cost. Kalen walked the halls of Raxos after the battle, stepping over the bodies of both friend and foe. He knew each victory invited greater retribution. And with every act of defiance, the Empire grew more desperate. From the throne world, Emperor Zorith himself finally took notice. A transmission cut through the rebel channels. The Emperor's towering form, his jeweled crest blazing with fury. One human days challenge my empire. One insect days infect the galaxy with rebellion. His voice shook the air like thunder. Kalen Ward, I will see your world burned, your name erased, and your species scattered to ash. Kalen listened in silence, his fists clenched. The Emperor's rage only confirmed what he already knew. The rebellion was no longer a spark. It was a wildfire, and it was coming for the heart of the Empire. The fall of an empire. The skies above the Zorithian throne world blazed with fire. Rebel fleets poured from hyperspace in a storm of steel and plasma. Their banners a patchwork of freed species united under one cause. At the center of the assault flew a captured warship, its hull scarred, its crew defiant. Kalen Ward stood on its bridge, staring down the empire that had once enslaved his kind. All channels report ready. Tirok rumbled, his talons tapping the console. Once we break orbit, the capital is ours. Kalen nodded, though his stomach churned. The coalition had bled for this moment. Entire species had risen and fallen to carve this path to the Emperor's gates. Victory meant freedom. Failure meant annihilation. Then we ended today, Kalen said. The battle raged across the void. Imperial dreadnoughts clashed with ragtag fleets, but arrogance had blinded the Zorithians. Their fleets relied on rigid formations, predictable tactics. The coalition swarmed like fire, humans leading daring strikes into the gaps, smaller ships crippling giants. Every explosion in orbit echoed the death of centuries of domination. On the ground, Kalen led the strike team through the capital's shattered gates. Towers of silver and obsidian loomed above them, symbols of Zorithian pride now scarred by flame. Resistance was fierce, but rebels pressed forward, step by bloody step. For every human who fell, two more surged forward, shouting Kalen's name as a battle cry. At the heart of the city rose the imperial spire, its crystalline walls glowing with power. And within it waited the Emperor. The throne chamber was vast, a cathedral of shadows and firelight. Emperor Zorith towered upon his dais, armored in black and gold, his jeweled crest blazing like a crown. So, the Emperor hissed, his voice filling the hall. The insect days crawl into the sun. You are nothing, human. A mistake of biology. How could one such as you imagine ending an empire older than your species' first spark of fire? Kalen stepped forward, his plasma blade igniting with a hiss. His voice was steady, though his heart thundered. Because you never understood us. You thought chains could break us, but chains only taught us how to fight. The duel erupted in fury. The Emperor struck with blinding speed, his weapon a storm of energy and wrath. Kalen met each blow with desperation sharpened into resolve. Sparks lit the chamber, echoes of steel and plasma ringing like thunder. Again and again, the Emperor's strength drove Kalen to his knees. But humanity had always endured. Kalen rose with each strike, fueled not by power, but by memory, Doran's lifeless body, the whispers of the oppressed, the cries of the freed. With a final surge, Kalen drove his blade through the Emperor's chest. The jeweled crest dimmed, the tyrant's eyes wide with disbelief. For the first time in millennia, silence filled the throne. The Empire shattered that day. Worlds once enslaved declared freedom. Chains broke, fleets scattered, and the galaxy itself shifted. As for Kalen, he did not stay to rule. When the dust settled, he vanished into the stars, leaving only a legend. Centuries later, children of a dozen species would whisper the tale. It was one human who sparked the war that ended an empire. And across the galaxy, humanity was no longer forgotten. They were remembered, feared, respected, eternal.